there was an accident. A part of a bridge collapsed suddenly, without warning. There had been no earthquake, no storm, no suspicious rumbling beneath the ground. Nothing. The sky that evening had been clear, the river calm, the air still. There was no sign, no whisper, no subtle shift that could have foreshadowed what came next. A structure once praised as one of the most stable bridges ever built, an engineering marvel in its time, gave way as easily as paper left in the rain. Only one life was lost that day, Henry Bergh. Now, let me tell you about Henry. Henry was the kind of man people seldom noticed unless they needed something organized. He was ordinary not in a dull way, but in the way that a well-made chair or a working light switch is ordinary, reliable, predictable. You could leave him with your plants while you went on vacation, and when you returned, they'd be alive and alphabetically labeled by species. That was Henry. He double-checked the locks. He read instructions twice. He researched everything, from the safest rice cooker to the most cost-efficient brand of socks. He took risks. He liked to say he did, but only the kind he called calculated risks, which really just meant risks that weren't risky at all. Even the unknown had to be measured, charted, plotted into a graph before he'd approach it. When it came to his finances, Henry invested with the precision of a surgeon. He diversified. He read market forecasts. He never spent more than he earned. The man once researched toothbrush prices for 2 hours because he didn't want to overpay by emotional convenience. This is not a joke. This is Henry. His relationships were a similar story. He believed everything should be mutual. He didn't mean that selfishly, at least not intentionally. He simply saw relationships as agreements, like contracts both sides benefited from. Love, in his mind, was just a mutual investment in shared habits and predictable routines. Even the time he actually fell in love real, heart-thick love high brushed it off as a chemical misinterpretation. Henry stuck to practicality. Passion, he believed, burned out. But compatibility, now that could be graphed. So instead of choosing someone who stirred his heart, he chose someone who fit the equation. A partner stable enough, similar enough, but not so similar that they'd clash. Someone who shared enough interests to keep things smooth, but not enough to disrupt his routines. Someone statistically unlikely to lead to divorce? That was Henry, never cruel, never malicious. Just structured. Averagely decent, as he might have described himself. To him, the world was a series of interactions governed by probability. A formula. A sequence. And if you just studied it enough, life became safe. He avoided stress by ranking tasks in order of urgency and importance. He avoided chaos by planning meals weeks in advance. Traveling for him meant spreadsheets, weather histories, safety records of airplanes, and the geological stability of destinations. In a strange way, studying statistics made him genuinely happy. It allowed him to believe he could manage life, navigate it, perhaps even control it. Now let me tell you about the bridge, to understand the tragedy. You have to understand that this wasn't just any bridge. It was a landmark, a proud piece of architecture known for its impeccable stability. Built decades before Henry was even born, it became something of a local legend. Schools took field trips to learn about it. Engineers praised its design. It was far from any fault lines. It had endured storms, floods, and time itself without complaint. And, according to every report Henry had ever read, it received regular maintenance. But reports aren't people. Reports don't get tired or cut corners, but the people who produce them do. And maintenance logs aren't truth, they are stories told in numbers. Stories that Henry trusted. The truth is that tiny cracks had formed inside the structure years bare. Hairline fractures invisible from the outside. They were the kind of cracks that should have been noticed, should have raised questions, should have prompted a second look. But they were ignored. Maybe the maintenance workers dismissed them as insignificant. Maybe they were overworked. Maybe they were told to stick to a checklist and nothing more. Or maybe the cracks were simply one of those things that hide in plain sight until the world decides to remember them. Regardless, the bridge was aging. And age, regardless of engineering pride, does not negotiate. It only took one car, one ordinary evening, one man driving home, one unsuspecting moment where statistics no longer mattered. Henry drove across that bridge the way he always did, calmly, carefully following the speed limit down to the decimal. He always chose routes based on traffic patterns, accident histories, and fuel efficiency. That night, for reasons unknown, he chose a slightly different lane. A small deviation, just a few feet to the right, nothing dramatic, nothing spontaneous. It's nothing that would have mattered on any other day in any other universe. But that short stretch of road, lined perfectly with the loosened patch where those tiny cracks, after decades of being ignored, had finally weakened the structure. And when Henry's car passed over that exact point only, that point the section beneath him collapsed, not the entire bridge. Only the portion weakened by years of unaddressed fractures. The river below wasn't deep, but it didn't need to be. The fall was enough. By the time rescue arrived, Henry was gone. Instantly, they said. Cleanly, as if fate had cut him out of the world with one precise stroke. And here's the strange part. Henry would have wanted an explanation, a formula, a chart. He would have wanted to know the exact percentage chances of structural failure, the physics behind the collapse, the measurable sequence of events. He would have wanted the cause, but I don't know much about engineering. I can't explain the structural dynamics that doomed him. I can't calculate the stress points or the exact force of impact. I can't convert tragedy into statistics the way Henry would have liked. But I do know one thing, for all his planning, his precautions, his careful calculations for all the safety measures he studied, the risks he minimized, the probabilities he charted, none of it mattered, because a bridge does not give a damn.